Good afternoon, Bay Area Book Festival, book lovers. Yeah, thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming to our panel. My name is Jeneé Darden. I am a radio host for KLW, and I am your multimedia diva, MC, moderator for this panel. Let's see, what else am I supposed to say? Book sales and signing location will be at Books Inc. behind us, between the Native California stage and the Fountain stage. So make sure you get some books from these awesome writers. And I think we'll start. How many of y'all like romance? Oh, okay, that's right. How many of y'all like love stories? All kind of love. Okay. Okay, so you're at the right place. So I think what I'm gonna start is that, and I've gone through their books. They're really, really, really great group of writers here. So I think what I'll start is asking you to say your name, like give a quick explanation what your book is about, and tell us what makes a good love story, a good romance story for you. So we can do a popcorn style. Who wants to go first? Name, book, and what makes a good love story.
So I am Emily Rose. I wrote Call of the Sea. It's a new adult fantasy romance. It's a plus-size, gender-bent Little Mermaid retelling about a fat human princess who wants nothing to do with her kingdom and wants to live a life of adventure on the ocean searching for mermaids. I think what makes a good romance is the characters. Like, you want characters you can root for, who you feel their connection like through the pages. The best romances are the ones where when I'm reading the book, I forget that they're not real people, like, here with me. I'm not experiencing this in real life. That's to me what makes a good romance.
Okay.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Dani Trujillo. I'm a Pueblo and Mexican author. I write romance and horror. My romance book is called Lizards Hold the Sun, and it's about an archaeologist who travels to a really remote location in Canada, and she happens to fall in love while she's on an excavation. I think, kind of like what Emily said, your characters are really important. And when you're writing something with a lot of cultural ties like I do, I think showcasing that in really authentic ways and really natural ways is what makes a love story really, really good.
Hi, everyone. I'm Taleen Voskuni, and I'm the author of Sorry Bro and Lavash at First Sight. Lavash at First Sight is the one that came out really recently, and it's about two women that fall in love at a Chicago food conference, but they're also rivals, and they were competing for a spot in a Super Bowl ad. But they find out that their parents are mortal enemies and have hated each other for like 20, 30 years. So there's a lot of sneaking around behind your back of your parents. My books tend to feature family very heavily. I'm Armenian, and my stories are very much about the Armenian diaspora experience. So what makes a great love story, I think, is yearning. I think that look across the room at someone when you're wondering, do they like you? Do you like them? What's going on here? That's the best. That's the best. So lots and lots of yearning.
Hi, my name is Ann Kim, but I write as A.H. Kim, and my latest book is called Relative Strangers, which is a contemporary retelling of Jane Austen's Sense and Sensibility, told from a Korean-American perspective and set here in the Bay Area. What I love about romance is the kind of the obstacles. If there aren't any obstacles, it's a very short book. So you need to have obstacles, whether those are like workplace obstacles or other people who get involved or family dramas. You always have to place obstacles in the way. And then, of course, you have the happily ever after at the end where you overcome all your obstacles.
Hello, my name is Anita Gail Jones, and my novel is The Peach Seed. It's my first novel, came out last August, and it's set in my hometown, Albany, Georgia, and flashes back to the civil rights movement that happened there. So it's historical fiction. And it also flashes back to a romance between two almost 70-year-olds. So let's hear it for that. almost 70-year-olds falling in love and finding love after losing it. So I think one of the things that makes a love story sparkle is a short-term mystery. You're not sure if it's going to work out. We always want to, like you say, you got to have those obstacles. And there's just an uncertainty about that. So I think that helps.
You all have chosen characters from marginalized communities, elders, plus-size fat people, indigenous people, people with mental health challenges, queer folks. Why, or what do you want to see in these people and how they are loved and how they love? Like, what did you want to see in that? And like I said, popcorn style, everybody just... When I do an interview on the radio, I pretend like it's my living room. So this right here, this is my living room. It's a nice big living room. So we just sitting here just talking. So let's talk. So yeah, like why did you, how did you want those characters to embody love, feel love, present love?
At least for me, when I was writing it, I knew I was fat. That wasn't something I discovered along the way, but I did discover that I was queer and that I had ADHD while I was writing it. I thought I was straight before I started writing it. I didn't know I had ADHD before I started writing it. So to me, this story not only is representation that I didn't have growing up, it gave me my like it showed me who I was. It helped me see who I was, and seeing people who have your identities that don't get shown fall in love and be the main character. Like, you don't see fat girls being desirable, being wanted, being the main character of their own story. Like, we don't get that very often. And so for me, it's about showing that as something that I didn't have growing up. I've been fat my whole life. I grew up fat and I only got to see skinny girls falling in love. Like, I never got to see someone who looked like me falling in love and being the main character, being anyone but the fat funny friends. Like, so seeing that on the page and seeing that represented is so important to me. And so getting to write that for other people to see, like, I've had a few people message me after reading and saying, like, I have never seen someone with ADHD be the main character, and like seeing that described so like authentically on the page. And it just, that's all I want. Yeah. That's all I want.
And you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think similarly, I think it's wanting to see yourself represented. Growing up, I grew up in a small town in western Pennsylvania, western New York, and I would go, like a good immigrant girl, I would go to the public library every Saturday to check out the books, and I would go to, walk down the aisles to look at the last names of all the authors, and I was always looking for Kim, which is my last name, and which is the most popular Korean last name. And so it's like looking for Smith or Jones, and there was never any Kims. And it's there is a sense of like, I don't belong in this country, or I don't belong in this community when you don't see yourself represented in the culture, when you don't see yourself represented in the bookstores and in the libraries. And so I sort of vowed to myself, I want to see a Kim, and I want to be that Kim. And now when I go to the bookstores, I mean, even if at this book festival we have multiple Kims, and that's such a point of pride for me. And so this book is, a Jane Austen retelling. I love Jane Austen, but all of her characters are white, upper class, straight. And I just recently moved out of the Bay Area to Ann Arbor, but I lived here for 25 years, and that is not my world. My world is all colors, all gender identities, all sexual orientations, etc. So I have people like that in my book. I have older people who find love in this book. I have, trans people, and it's not to me like a political message, as it's just a message of diversity and inclusion and welcoming to the community. So I try not to be too political, but I think I'm like sneakily political in my books.
So I was of a certain age when I started writing this. It took 14 years to get this book between covers. And it's about endurance. So as I grew closer to the age of the couple in the book, certain things became a little clearer to me, and I understood what it means to age and how you get treated a certain way as you become invisible in certain company, and there's a lot of ageism out here. So when I saw the opportunity, I always knew that was something that was always in the manuscript, was this love story. It's kind of almost a vital seed in the story. When I saw that opportunity to really elevate it, I ran for it because it needs to happen.
Yes, so similarly, so my characters, as I mentioned, are Armenian and they're queer. Armenians, if you don't know, have a very tragic backstory with the Armenian genocide in 1915. That's why most of us are scattered all over the world. And all our stories, of which there are few, there aren't that many published, traditionally published Armenian stories, they're all really sad, and that's absolutely understandable. There's a lot to say. There's a lot of tragedy there, and those stories absolutely need to be told. But there are no happy ones. And I thought, I want to write a happy story. We deserve joy, too. We deserve this happiness. And, like, frivolity, even. Lavash is just for fun. It is such a, like, fun, lighthearted kind of book. And especially that these characters are queer as well, queer and Armenian together. It's tough to be a queer Armenian right now, today. Like, in Glendale, there are still, like, protests going on about, taking out queer literature from schools. And if you don't know, Glendale has a huge Armenian community, and a lot of Armenians are at the forefront of that movement, unfortunately. So when I write these books and give queer Armenians a happy ending, I feel it's almost subversive, actually. Like, we are here, we can be queer, we can be Armenian, and we can have our happy ending. So that's why I write what I write.
I'll make mine a little quick, but y'all ever watch Hallmark movies? Yeah, and everybody's white, right? And growing up, I always wanted to see two Native people falling in love. That was I wanted to see that. That's who I am. That's what I wanted to see. And eventually I decided to just write it. And similarly, like you were saying, we deserve joy. There is so much trauma out there. When you look at the majority of traditionally published Native books, a lot of it is, trauma focused, or there's going to be a lot in there. And I didn't want that. I wanted it to be about joy and love and friendships and families and all of that. So yeah, I wanted to put Hallmark on the page and give us something to be happy when we read it.
I hear people snapping and clapping to that. Dani, I'm thinking about your book because you had some good kissing scenes in your book. And her characters are nerds. I'm a nerd, so I'm all about nerd love. So yeah, and like I said, I appreciate everybody's book. Like body positivity, like all of that, mental health. Folks with mental health issues deserve love too. People all sizes deserve love, and ages, and races, and sexualities. And I love that your book had food, which is like that's a sexiness to it too. It's just one to eat. So good Armenian food. So speaking of sexiness, again, y'all had some steam in the books, and steam in your other books. For those of you who've written multiple books, what is it like for you to write? I know y'all been wanting me to ask this question, right? That's why you came here, right? I couldn't just start off right there, right? How is it for you writing those love scenes? Especially too, keeping in mind like you're picking characters that we don't see in mainstream media being loved and embraced, or even maybe have sexual autonomy, all of those things. How was it for you to write these intimate scenes with these characters from these different backgrounds? Give us the tea.
I can go first. So my character, Xiomara, is Mexican from Mexico, and she heads up to Canada and meets a First Nations Cree guy, and they hit it off. And yeah, I think writing those sex scenes, I wanted it to be sex positive, I wanted it to be body positive, and I wanted it to have, those emotional moments where they're connecting and maybe they're even laughing sometimes. You've got a real good partner when you guys can laugh while you're having sex. Like, that's the key, I think. Yeah, and I wanted to show that. And I think for Native women and Latina women, we're often so hypersexualized to the point of being murdered quite often, right? And so for me, I wanted to show, a happy, healthy sexual relationship where she's making these choices, she's kind of initiating, and he's sort of like responding. Yeah, so that was important to me.
So my first book was called A Good Family, and it's based loosely on my experience supporting my brother and his children while my sister-in-law was in women's prison. So women's prison, you got to have some girl-on-girl action, right? So that's, I had some of that in my first book, and my father, who passed away last year, was so proud to have me as a published author. So he went out and bought like dozens of copies of my book and gave them to all of his friends who are like these 85-year-old Korean men. And, so my book has all this like girl-on-girl action, women's prison action. And they would come up to me and they'd say like, I read your book and I really enjoyed it. Just like kind of horrified, I'm an adult. I'm glad to talk about sex. I'm glad to write about sex. But somehow having these 85-year-old men, friends of my dad, Korean immigrants, telling me that they enjoyed my book was a little bit awkward. And so for my second book, this one, I definitely made it more PG-13. Most of the sex scenes are off-screen. I think I just had this little like image of my dad's friends again coming up to me, and I was just like, I don't want to have that awkward moment again. So these scenes are a lot more tender and a lot more like kissing oriented and less. I don't know that I have any girl-on-girl action in this one, but anyway. There's all love in all forms.
So there's one scene, I think it might have been the first time they had sex in the book. Altavis and Fletcher are the couple, the almost 70-year-old couple. And he walks into her hotel room and she's got candles all around, and it's clear that there's something that's supposed to happen there. And she tells him that she stopped short at satin sheets because she figured they might slide out of bed and they couldn't get up. To which he says, well, I'm sure we could find something to do while we were down there. So that's my opinion of the whole thing. It's like, find the beauty and the joy and the laughter in it. And so as I said, when I started over 10 years ago, I was of a certain age, and I had a friend who had turned 70. And I hope it's okay that I tell this story. I think so, no kids around. So I asked her, so tell me, what's that 70-year-old sex like anyway? I mean, I got to write this scene. I want to really get into it. And she just looked at me and laughed. She said, well, at this point, it's pretty much a DIY situation.
So now we see the connection between Anne's dad's friends and then, Anita's. I'm telling you, when you talk to your elders and you get a certain age, they keep it real about that. Your grandparents, they still alive, if you know what I mean. Your great aunts and stuff, they are. They still alive, if you know what I mean. Who else didn't answer did everybody answer?
Well, mine are closed door because I preemptively thought about all the 85-year-old men. So the Armenian community is really small in the Bay Area, and it really feels like family. And also I have a lot of family. And I knew for my first book, they would be reading it. And they did. They all read it. My in-laws read it. My father-in-law read it. So it is closed door, which means when they go to the bedroom, the door shuts, and certain things are hinted at, but nothing is shown on the page. However, I do love flirtation a lot. So I do feel like leading up to it is really, really flirty. Yeah. And in Lavash at First Sight, there is literal steam because they're in a Roman bathhouse when they have their first kiss, and they're floating there in the salt baths. So there's still something fun.
When I was writing mine, there were two aspects that I really wanted to focus on and talk about, and it's because my main character, Kenna, is fat, but she's also demisexual. For those who don't know, it's under the asexual spectrum where you don't feel sexual attraction without emotion first. And not many people know about it and not many people understand it. When I tell people, they're like, oh, isn't that just how all women feel attraction? And yeah, it's definitely one of the smallest queer communities. I don't know about actual people in that community, but representation-wise, it's one of the smallest communities, and not many people have even heard of it or know anything about it. And I really wanted to show that on the page. And also, again, as a fat women are not shown being desirable. They're not shown being sexual. They're not shown being any of these things. And I really wanted to be careful with that as well, because I didn't want it to end up being the whole oh, she only felt happy and desirable in her body when a man loved her and that kind of stuff. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't falling into that trap. And also learning to love your body is a lifelong journey. You don't just be like, oh, I'm happy now and I'm happy for the rest of my life and I never once think about my body again. Like, that's not how it works. And so I wrote her in a place where she is mostly comfortable with her body, but being comfortable in your own body and being comfortable with someone else loving your body are two separate things. And I really wanted to talk about that and have moments where she does want to have sex with him once she feels that attraction, once that established connection has happened, but she still has some hesitation. She still has some self-consciousness, and just to have a partner who is supportive and being like, okay, if you're not comfortable, we'll stop. Or if you are comfortable, we'll go. Like, putting her in control, having her be the one to ask for what she wants. I feel like that was really important to me.
And she was a queen, a princess, yeah. So there's that too. So she has standards, but she has serious standards because she needed somebody to rule the kingdom with her. But I want to talk about tension in your stories. And Taleen, I'm thinking of you, just because those two characters, they were kind of opposite a bit, and one was a little more aggressive, but it was good tension in there, which I think y'all like tension, that tension in a love story. That's good, huh? A little opposites attract, little tension. Can y'all talk about that? Just putting tension, that builds the romance, builds the love, gets the reader excited. I'm excited just thinking
tension.
about it.
Oh, thank you for calling that out, because that is actually my favorite part. Is before they kiss is always my favorite part because of the tension, because of the will we, won't we, what do they think, and that the micro steps towards flirtation. It's like, all right, can I say this? How was it received? All right, can I say this now? How was it received? So for me, that is really fun, and opposites attract is huge for me. That's usually, me and my spouse, we're very, very different in a lot of ways, and I find that's what often, not always, but that can be a really good long-term relationship. So I like to write those types of characters.
And anybody else can jump in too if you want to talk about tension in your stories.
I'll say one type of tension I have in my book that maybe nobody else has is that because mine is is an homage to a book, it's not quite a retelling. People who are familiar with the book think, oh, I already know it's going to happen. It's going to be exactly the same book as Jane Austen's book, but I played around with it. So the tension is, are they going to end up with the same happily ever afters or the same spouse or the same partners at the end of this book as there is in the original book? And spoiler alert, no.
Okay. Well, in the creation of story, you've got to have conflict, you've got to have tension, or you have no story. So you're just looking for ways what that tension's going to be, and it has to be pertinent to the story, to the characters, to everything you're trying to do in the book. So Fletcher and Altavis started out as 18-year-olds in the midst of the civil rights movement in Albany, Georgia, which is the factual part of the book. And they were very much in love. Everybody thought they'd marry. You know how in the yearbook, you're the couple most likely to. So they were just destined for marriage, and that's the first little piece of trouble. They didn't get married. She migrated north, he stayed south, and 52 years later, she comes back, and she'd bring in some serious baggage. Oh, we have no story. So I'm always looking for opposites, and especially if I get to a point where I'm not sure where to go, I say, what's the opposite of whatever's happening? And that generally gets me going in a direction. It may not be where I end up, but it definitely gets me motivated to go somewhere from there.
Did anybody else want to? Thank you. Did anybody else want to add in?
Yeah, my favorite part of romance is flirty banter. And so I wanted to make sure I had some flirty banter in there as well. And again, with the demisexuality, what some people don't understand is that attraction and sexual attraction can be two different things. And so she may have found him attractive at first, but she didn't want to jump into bed with him the moment she met him. And so that was something fun that I wanted to explore, that the tension between oh yes, he is attractive, but I don't want anything more than that. And I think that's something that, especially in the asexual spectrum, is something that should be explored more in romances, because you can have romance without sex, you can have sex without romance, and there is a million different combinations of the two, and my story is just one of those. And every person's experience with queerness is different, not even just asexuality, but any type of queerness is different. And so that was something really fun to like kind of explore with like that flirty banter of like, how far are they gonna push this flirting and stuff without going that far in the beginning?
Characters that are very, I think, for all of your books, I noticed that had like a strong role or purpose in your books are family. Because, you know, family like to get in our business when it comes to dating and romance, right? And I noticed family was, and even love, you know, I mean, we're talking about love stories, and like even just that love, there's a love story with families in your books, or absence of family. Some of your characters may be grieving too. Can you talk about that? Just like the role of family in romances in your books?
Yeah, I think for Indigenous families and Mexican families too, your family plays such a huge role in your everyday life. A lot of times you have obligations, not just to your immediate family, but to your extended family, to your community as a whole. If you have a clan, you have, you know, an obligation and responsibilities to your clan. And all of that is, you know, part of your life. So when you're bringing someone into your life, they have to understand that you have those responsibilities. And they might have responsibilities and obligations for their family and their community and their clan. So it can be a balancing act. For people who aren't Native, sometimes they have a hard time understanding all of the responsibility that we have, or that we think about our family so often before we make decisions or do things. So yeah, family is a huge part in both of my books, and especially in Lizards, we have, you know, a single dad, and he's just such a huge part of everything, and he really sort of adopts the main character and sort of extends that fatherly love to her. And her father is deceased, so it's a really like moving piece of the story. And there will be family in all of my books, I promise you.
The family, it's a family saga, The Peach Seed. So it has the current day family, 2012, thank you. In 2012, Georgia, flashes back, and then the story flashes back to the imagined ancestral story. And there's also a beautiful love story there with these folks who are the current day are the descendants of this ancestral piece, but they don't know anything about them. And as I wrote the ancestral piece, I was hoping that the reader, like I was, would want to be able to tell the current day folks, I know your story, I know all about it, I know where you come from, I know where this tradition you have of carving peach seed monkeys comes from, I know all your stuff. But you can't, because of the wall of history and because it was a part of a plan. So I was very interested in elevating the beauty, the tender moments, even within the horror of the enslavement period, because you know there had to be beautiful moments in order for me to be here. There were tender moments, and I wanted to elevate those. We all know the horrors. We've read the books, we've seen the movies, and I think too often we are asked to wallow in the horror and not see the beauty. So that was my big goal, was to elevate the beauty. So I have a beautiful enslavement story, love story as well, with Malik, who is torn away from his wife and children and ends up with a new wife and children in the South Carolinas. So that's some heavy stuff, that he is grateful that his children back in Africa were too young to remember him. And so they won't be so scarred because they don't know who he is. And he carries that. He has to carry that. And then he marries someone who has the same kind of problem. So family is inseparable from the rest of it.
Yeah, when I was first told I was going to be on this panel, I think it was described to me as a romance panel. And I thought, ooh, I'm not sure I am a romance writer, because, you know, you have certain thoughts when you hear those words. And then it was clarified that it was actually a panel about love, which made me feel more comfortable because my book is definitely about love. I think the central story is really a sister story. It's the story between Eleanor, the older sister, and in Jane Austen's original, the younger sister's called Marianne. In my book, she's called Amelia. And it's that tension between the older sister, who's kind of the responsible one, who takes charge of the family, who's, very in control of her life, or so it seems. And then the younger sister, who's more impetuous, more flamboyant, and maybe seems a little bit out of control of her life, and their journeys toward happiness and fulfillment, but also that tension between the two sisters. And it's really based a lot on my relationship with my younger sister. I'm the older, responsible one. My sister is the devil-may-care, one who had the fabulous career in New York and gave it all up to just live in the middle of nowhere. And there's so much love there within the sister relationship, but there's also so much drama and tension. And I think that's such a vein of storytelling that's very rich with stories. So that's, but yeah, in addition to the sisters, there's also the mother, there's a niece, there's all sorts of family relationships, and romance on the side too.
It's a lot, going on in your book. It's a lot of hooking up and it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. That family, they got a lot going on. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, family is huge in my books. Almost too much. Like if you're a hardcore romance reader, you gotta like family to enjoy my books.
Yeah.
So in Sorry Bro, it's really about, I would say Sorry Bro is, I love my new girlfriend, and also I love my mom. Like it's a I love my mom story in the end too, as much as it is a love story. And in Lavash, both sets of parents are there in Chicago at the food conference the whole time, and they're one-upping each other. The dads are being macho, the moms are being passive-aggressive. And I just want to highlight, for Armenians, for being such a people with, a tragic people, we're also pretty funny. Like I think we're hilarious in our day-to-day moments, like living life. And I just think about the people I know, and I want to, I take snippets of them and put that in there to kind of share with the world, like what we're really like. So, family's huge in my books.
I come from a very large, very chaotic, and also very loving family. And so family's always played like one of the main roles in my life. And then obviously my book is a Little Mermaid retelling. And what is Disney known for? Tragic families and orphans. And so I really wanted to write a story that, I don't know if it's a true retelling either. It's very much like taking the core parts of the story and making it something new. But she has two parents, and while she does love them and they have a good relationship, it's complicated, and not everything's perfect, because not everything is perfect with that. And as, again, with the ace community, like there are so many different kinds of love in the world, and like getting to explore that in romance is so fun, especially because yes, a romance means that the core of the story is going to be the romantic story, but then there's also different kinds of love you can explore in that as well. Familial love, platonic love. And so one of my favorite authors, Jessica Joyce, her book, she describes her main character, her soulmate was her grandma. And that was something so moving to me. And I love seeing that like a soulmate doesn't always have to be romantic. And in my book, I would say her soulmate is her twin brother.
Yeah.
And so their relationship plays a very big part, especially at the beginning of the story. And is something that I feel very passionate about, like especially familial love. Like it's such a big thing.
Definitely. The twins are close. Yeah, and with all of your books, and this has come up too, is just being from marginalized community. But in your books, you all have found the pleasure, and given your characters pleasure within the pain. With whatever weight that they're carrying. So I also admire that about all your works too. And we're gonna open it up for questions. Does anybody have questions for our wonderful panel? Yes. Who has the wireless mic? Yeah.
So I'm just curious, how did you all find your writing groups? Because especially writing like queer romance, writing about marginalized identities, like how did you find a group of people that you consistently trust with these stories and to give you feedback on them as they're growing?
I'll answer first. I don't have a writing group. I have some friends that kind of like alpha read for me, and they're also really awesome at pointing out things and being like, hey, I don't think you should say that. And I'm like, you're probably right. Let me fix that. And then I do have like a few friends that are right. One of my friends who's a writer is here. And so I think it's awesome to kind of like talk to them. But yeah, I don't have a writing group. So do you guys have groups? Tell me how you found them.
30 years ago, I had the honor of being chosen for a writing residency on the island of Whidbey Island off the coast of Seattle, Hedgebrook writing residency for women. It was really the first thing outside of myself that recognized the potential in something I was working on. It wasn't this book, it was a previous book that's going to be the second book in this 2-book deal that I have. But I connected with other alums from that organization. We connected, the Bay Area folks, we connected, and that's what I've had since. And it's just so valuable. You just have to look around your life and be aware of the opportunities when they pop up. So about 4 of us splintered off from the main group, and we started another smaller group called First Book. And we seriously workshop our manuscripts together. We'll spend 4 hours on 50 pages of one person on a Sunday afternoon and just really get in there and work on it. And it's no small thing. So you're very right on to be looking for that, because it's valuable and it's something you should really work at happening. And it's possible, very possible to form that. So good luck to you.
I don't think that I have a writing group, but I definitely have friends that I have met along the way, and social media, to be honest. There's a book community on Instagram known as Bookstagram. I was a bookstagrammer before I was an author. Like, that's how I started. And I met my friends through Bookstagram, either people who were also bookstagrammers who wanted to write, that we've written together and stuff like that, or even sliding into some of my favorite authors' DMs and just being like, hi, I love you, let's be friends. That's how I've made a lot of my author friends, actually. Most of them is me just like DMing them and being like, hi, I really like your stuff, let's talk. And so that's how I found pretty much all of my, like, I don't have like a group that sits down and we all read each other's work every single time, but I have friends that like will do like, oh, hey, I really need to get some writing done today. Are you around? Let's do like a sprint. Let's set a timer for 20 minutes and write as much as we can. Like that kind of stuff. That's basically, yeah, social media is pretty incredible for authors. And it can also be pretty terrible, but it can be pretty incredible for authors because writing is a very lonely experience sometimes.
Just seconding that. Twitter. Twitter's a little different now. I won't even say its new name, but maybe Threads. But that really is, I don't have an in-person group, and I don't have a group like exactly like Emily was saying, but I have, people that I've met from writing contests. That's a big one when you're all hopefuls and you're trying to get into this writing contest. You meet each other on social media, and you kind of you read each other's work, just like a first chapter, get a feel for how they write. They get a feel for how you write, and you can tell if you kind of vibe with each other. So some of my best writing friends are from, like, they were previously hopefuls, and they're the ones I exchange, like, my roughest first drafts with now.
I think I'm probably the oldest person on the panel, and I'm sort of the most old school. And so I do like to meet people in person. And so the people that I met, I might have like taken like a 8-week writing workshop at some local, writing salon or something. And you can find the people whose writing appeals to you, whose comments really resonate with you, and you sort of afterwards connect and exchange information. And then typically they might have a friend also who's sort of in the same boat as you, and then you say, like, do you want to start a group? And so both this book as well as my previous book as well as an unpublished book, I workshop them all with the same group of basically 4 to 6 other authors. At first, we met in person at each other's homes, and then the pandemic happened, and we met virtually, and we continued to meet virtually. To me, one of the things, in addition to the person-to-person sort of connection and feeling like you respect their opinion, is like ground rules. So we followed sort of this method that's called the Amherst Writers and Artists Method, which is about constructive criticism as opposed to destructive criticism. And so what we would do is we would start every session talking about what we loved and remembered about the excerpt that we shared. so that you feel buoyed and supported. And then each of us would ask specific questions that we wanted feedback on. Do you like my protagonist? Are you getting lost in the details? Are there things that are confusing? So that you're getting the feedback that you want and not the feedback that you don't want. Some people wanted line edits, some people didn't. Some people wanted punctuation, other people didn't. So you ask for what you want.
And just to piggyback on back of that, I'm a poet too as well. My book is called When a Purple Rose Blooms at Black Lawrence Press Table, somewhere around here. But anyway, and so how I'm like you. I'm a analog girl in a digital world, so I like meet people in person. So you're at the right place because this is a place where you can meet people. There may be people tabling, like writers groups tabling too. So maybe look into them. And because I'm in the poet community, I would go to different readings, literary readings, and that's how I met people, is going to literary readings. And like what Ann said, like going to writing classes, you can meet people that way too.
I guess, yeah, book festivals and book signings as well are great places to meet people, especially book signings. Lots of aspiring authors love to go to book signings and hear authors talk about their work, and you meet people in the audience. You meet people waiting in line to get your book signed after the talk, and that's actually how I met one of my best friends, was waiting in line at a book festival. We've been friends for 5 years now. Like, you meet people everywhere.
Yeah. Thank you for your question. Anybody else we have like time for, I think, maybe one more question? Oh. We can do two questions. Go ahead. You go, and then the person
Hi.
behind
I'm
you.
wondering if Anita went to Senegal when researching your book, and also if it was worth it to do the trailer.
Oh gosh, you mentioned the trailer. Thanks for mentioning the trailer. I did not go to Senegal. I have yet to step foot on the continent of Africa, except through Google Maps. It's pretty amazing. You take that little yellow guy and just drop him down into places and walk around and look at stuff. It's pretty amazing. It was interesting to me that the editor that I hired to help me when I knew I had gone as far as I could go, and that's key, by the way, in your process, is knowing when you need help and getting it, and being willing to let go and get help. So she commented on how the ancestral piece had so much more imagination in it, because it had to. I had to invent everything that happened in the ancestral piece, whereas the current day piece is based on what I know of Albany, having grown up there, and I know about those folks. So it was interesting to me that I could do that, and I think that it served the story well that I actually had not gone, because I could create, and this is after all fiction, not a documentary or anything else, so I invented that world. And as for the trailer, I have no regrets for making a book trailer in a time when nobody makes book trailers anymore. They were popular a few years ago, but publishers decided they don't sell books. But I decided I wanted one, so I hired some folks, and we put together a beautiful trailer. And if each and every one of you goes and watches it, I'll get a lot more views, and I'd appreciate that. So you just go to what's it called, YouTube, type in The Peach Seed, and it'll come up. So thank you for mentioning that.
And then one last question. Thank you for your question.
I just wondered if you could talk, maybe Anne and Anita, about the journey of getting published as an older author, like what the publishing world's prejudices against older authors who are new.
I've been surprised that, you don't have the, 5 under 35, those kinds of things, but a lot of my friends who were debut authors the year that I was a debut author, 2020, a lot of us were over 50, some of them I wasn't over 60, but over 50. And so I don't necessarily think that there's a huge bias against older authors. And I think that we have lived a life and we have great experiences, and our stories need to be told. So if you're at all interested, I always tell everybody, everyone's got a book in them. You should write it. If you are interested in writing, please come up to me later, and I'm happy to give you some ideas and tips.
I totally agree with what you've just said, and to that I would add that it's about endurance and the experience that we bring to it. But I was a little nervous when I got some interest from Henry Holt, and I thought, do they know how old I am and how long this took? I'm not telling. But I think it really boils down to the work. The work is good, and you keep behind it and push, as James Baldwin said, and I'm sort of quoting, he says, "I know a lot of talented ruins, but beyond talent is endurance." And that's really the name of the game. So stick it out, because it's worth sticking out.
Thank you for your question. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to this wonderful panel, this wonderful group of authors. Again, they will be at the Books Inc. tent signing their books. So go talk to them, buy their books, and that the Books Inc. table is between Native California Stage and Fountain Stage. And enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you all for coming. Keep reading those good love stories.